So, pulling. Pulling is generally pretty easy, at least assuming two things. One, you haven't touched your file since the merge. If you've, because of how Unreal creates random files and edits things, a lot of their background files constantly, if you open up the file before updating it after a merge or before pulling after a merge, you will get some changes over here, and then it'll create conflicts when you go to pull from the remote. It's pretty simple. I'm gonna go over the once again, I'm going to do basic and then more in depth. There isn't a ton to cover in the more in depth version though. We'll do pull fast forward if possible. We could also come up here and hit this pull button here. It should be by default set to pull fast forward if possible. So yeah, I'm going to do that. Pull fast forward if possible. Boop. And sometimes GitKraken runs pretty slow for me. So you saw a thing there where it was popped up. There were changes. It looks scary, but really that was just it going through the steps needed to pull. So now you can see that my local copy of Aaron is up to date with the remote copy of Aaron, and this is after merge, so I got all the changes that everybody had, and yeah, I'm good to go. So that's the basics of pulling. Pulling. The advanced version. I don't have a ton to pull to that. I don't have a ton to put in here. Fetch all. This is an important one to know about. This fetches changes from the remote branch, and it's actually a sub-step of what we do when we do a regular pull, which is regular pull does a fetch all, and then if we have additional changes we can update to. It updates to that. But the fetch all, if I want to know what Ruben's up to, what his last push was, if he did a last push, just really quick hitting fetch all should let me see any of those changes. Pull fast forward only is like pull fast forward if possible, but it's fast forward only. I am not sure about the Git specifics on this one. So if we ever find it relevant, we can look into it at that point. And then there is pull rebase. I've done some experimentation with this one. I'm not quite sure exactly how it works at this point, or what the different results are. My assumption is that if we have changes over here, and I have a version of this branch that is ahead of my current branch, but I have changes applied to this one, I can hit pull rebase and we'll take those changes and it will apply them ahead of the latest version. In practice, this doesn't seem to always happen. It doesn't always seem to produce the result that you would think that it would. So not entirely sure about that one either, but those options are there. So, boys and girls, welcome back. This is going to be the third time I've done this, but it'll probably be the first time for you guys. The astute of you may note that the branch that I currently have checked out already has a copy up on Origin. That's because I already pushed it. And if you stick around for the more in-depth version of this, I'll show you how I did that. Super simple, very nice. So for what most of us are doing here, pushing is pretty simple. All we really have to do within GitKraken is come up here and hit stage all changes. This takes all the changes that we've accrued while we've been working, and it stages them so that we can commit them. I'm going to get started on my summary here. So I'm going to make a little commit message here. I should be noted that none of this is up to any sort of a code. The more descriptive you can be, the better. If we were in a more professional environment, then we might have more strict guidelines as to how we denote all this information for communication purposes, but because we're a pretty small team and a pretty small, well, smallish project, it's not that important. Added. Forgive any egregious misspellings that I make here. I'm just. It's an S. I'm not being very detailed because I know I'm going to come back later and redo this. Alright. Now that I've made my description here, I'm going to commit the changes to the files. This creates a local copy of that sort of iteration, essentially. All the changes that I've made in the last however long I've been working on this are now saved in a little copy, separate from. It's essentially a new version, an updated version of the project file. If I wanted to go back to working on it here, I could make a branch off of here and and essentially erase all those changes that I made. It GitKraken tracks all the changes throughout history. All right, so we are going to do a little bit more in-depth coverage of what is possible here with GitKraken, or things you can do and why you might do those things. This is far from an end-all be-all. I'm gonna do a reset soft keep all changes. So I just want to. I know that I want to work from this one because I don't need to keep all the changes that I just pushed there. I'm gonna reset AI to here. Soft keep all changes. There's mixed. I'm not entirely sure how mixed works exactly. Soft, as you can see there, takes all the changes that we pushed up and dumps them here into stage files, and then we can do with them what we want from there. We can unstage them, remove them, etc. Just double checking a couple things here. So we have here a few options. We have unstaged files, stage files. Covered that before. We can make that disappear. This button does stuff. Tree takes us to a file tree view. Very useful, especially when working with stuff on Unreal, where you can tell what you do and don't want to keep, typically based on where it is saved within the Unreal file tree. This is content. This is what shows up. This is the folder that displays when you're in the content browser on Unreal. So these are where the changes that I want to keep are located. All the files that I have touched are there. All the files that Unreal has generated are in here. Depending on what you're doing, the editor for the project settings could be a relevant file to stage to keep, but typically isn't. I think that is in config under saved. So in this case, I know that the changes that I made were pretty much just in the content browser. I want to stage that folder. Boom. Now I know that I have what I need. All the rest of these are garbage, and I can discard them. I could click on Howard up here, and I could discard the changes to that folder. If I needed to get more granular, as I pull stuff up here, you can see it gives you a display. When it gives you a display of what changes were made. Most of what is in Unreal are binary files, which are just ones and zeros that get interpreted by the engine to create the different things that we use, like the BTT task suspicious state. And that makes merging difficult sometimes because you can't keep changes from two different binary files. It's either one or the other because of how easy it is to screw up that information. there anything else in here that I need to keep? Data change. I did change that, so I'm gonna save that there. Or stage it rather. There's a couple different ways you can select stuff in here. It works essentially like like any other file navigator does. If I hold Control here, not sure what it is on Mac. Sorry if you got a Mac. I can go through and individually select stuff. If I hold Shift, I can select sort of top to bottom. Those are the ones I know about. I can also right-click in here, and then it gives me some more options, like opening stuff in a different tool with more options. GitKraken is pretty user-friendly. There aren't a bunch of like super technical stuff options that you can do in here, which I am very thankful for, because it's made it possible for me to like start to learn GitKraken or Git control, Git file. I'm not sure what the exact wording there is, but edit file, delete file. So yeah. Go back to the tree here. I'm gonna discard all changes in this folder because I don't want them. Reset those files. It's important to note, discard all changes discards everything in here. Everything. That's one of the few ways that you can genuinely screw up stuff, is if you're not pushing often and you come in here and you hit the discard all changes button. And that will wipe out all the changes you just made, so be very careful with that. Alright, so I'm gonna write my description here. You can see that we're down from 161 files to 34. That is a significant difference, and the reason that I do that is because even when I do stuff like you can see I did bloat column master here, where I went in and I removed a whole bunch of files that were in our, because you get autosaves from me, autosaves from Tyler, autosaves from Kenton, autosaves from Ruben. Every time anybody opens up the file, works on something, it gets autosaved usually about 10 times. So you can see I have here 413 files that I removed. Now in terms of making stuff more navigable and usable, that's super nice. But in terms of reducing bloat on our up on GitHub, right, essentially the amount of the data, that actually doesn't help, because when I remove stuff here, it's not like deleting a file. It's saved as a change to the file. So we actually, when I did that, I have doubled the amount of data that is up on GitHub, because now there's the change of addition and there's the change of removal, and those are both saved in our history. So the only way to actually remove that information would be to do some operations like a squash, or to delete the history which is associated with the addition of those files. So yeah, not great. It's much more efficient to just keep the changes that we need on those files. Because this project isn't super big, like I've said before, I've said many times, and this is super big, and it's much better to have people using GitKraken and using version control than it is to have them using it properly and using it well. We just have you stage all files and not worry about what is and isn't proper to push. Instead of adding additional complexity there, just have everything that was changed, dump it in there, load it up, and then we'll work with it from there. So I usually do that too, just because it makes life quicker. This really doesn't need me. And I always talk about how we might do more descriptive, how if we were in a different kind of workplace, we would do more descriptive commits here. Typically what that looks like is something like this. So I would say, let's say plus, I added btt underscore the thing that I added, probably search. I did a search task. I added something to do with suspicious. Go into behavior tree files. You can see here the ones I added patrol facing BTT. So I would talk about the additions there. I would mark the files that I added, files that I changed with this one right here, files that I removed with a minus there. I'm sure there's other symbols that people use. And I would be as specific as possible about what I did not touch, what I did not modify, because if, let's say, we have an issue down the line where I realize that BTT, that this is corrupted or something that I did broke it, I want to be able to go back through and see if I broke it, if Ruben broke it, if maybe somebody was dicking around with something else and that broke it. Knowing what has changed, the more information you have when you're looking back at the past, the better. It's also super useful when you're trying to help other people out when they're either having difficulties pushing stuff, to see what they were working on. All around, the more detailed your descriptions can be, the better. Because I don't follow my own advice, I don't remember specifically what I worked on. I could go through there and I could copy paste everything there, but I'm not going to, for the sake of time and for the sake of this recording. Implemented patrolling, suspicious, and searching. Searching is not fully implemented. Is not ready for use in game aside from standing in as a placeholder. Alright. I apologize if you're watching this because I'm probably not going to go back and edit this to be quicker. Sorry, man. Or woman. Sorry, people. Headspin. Sweet. So now I have spell check on this. It was a pain in the butt. I don't need. Oh, come on, Jim. Alright. Can I mount? I can't drag it. Let me drag. Oh, runtime? This. GitKraken. So now I'm going to commit these changes. And I'm going to push these changes. It's going to give me a warning here. If you watch the earlier version, you know what's going on here. Force push, force push. I know that I don't want those changes that I had there because I had too much. I just need these 34 files. So yeah, honestly, I probably don't even need that. Probably stuff in here that I did that I didn't need to do. I remove move to attack. Interesting. I wonder if that was on purpose. So yeah, that's a little bit more in-depth coverage of how to push. If you have any questions about what I covered, I'm not sure if I covered everything I intended to cover there. So yeah. Now we can talk about polling. If you ever have any problems with GitKraken, I'm sure this is not going to, this little video is not going to encompass all of the situations with Git that we're going to face over the next few months. So if you ever have any problems or you find that stuff isn't look the way you expect it to do or work the way you expect it to do, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And we'll see if we can get that stuff handled. It's pretty hard to screw stuff up in GitKraken permanently, or yeah, it's pretty hard to screw stuff up permanently. So generally, we can get that figured out. So hope this was helpful for you guys, and let me know if you have any questions.